I think I've gotten tired of content creators and I think video game journalists and just video game journalism in general. I feel like people are just not happy with video games unless they are the next best thing every time they release. And that's the problem. Like we have too many expectations that we really hold on to. I think we need to curb our expectations to realism and kind of understand where we are when it comes to video games and technology. Now, it doesn't excuse games to come out and be janky as they are. So I think reviews are rarely read into, and that's kind of the problem with Gotham Knights currently. And that is what I want to talk about right now is Gotham Knights and the state of the reviews for Gotham Knights more than anything. One content creator that I do enjoy watching and looking into is ACG, who tends to do a lot more realistic game reviews, and I've agreed on a lot of his points when he stated them about Gotham Knights. I think the point is that people tend to look at the people who are bigger for their reviews, and a lot of those people are not as passionate for the game. I think that, certain content creators tend to have a heavy weight with their words, and they can easily sway people into thinking that a game is bad when it's not really entirely as bad as it is. Like, for example, Cyberpunk is still a great looking game, but back then you would call it bad and it's immediately a 1 out of 10. And I think the problem with that is the fact that, I think we all knew that Cyberpunk would have gotten a fix. Whereas Anthem, we could kind of see the slippery slope that was a mess of a game that was never going to just come back out of, because we know that EA likes to just can games if they just don't do well. And I think Gotham Knights is another one of those games where it's not even as bad as Cyberpunk for me when it first launched. And I think that people are shitting on it a lot harder than Cyberpunk. I feel like a lot of people are going to be talking about Gotham Knights as much as they've been talking about Battlefield, which, obviously has gotten a lot better since the last past year. And it kind of sucks because as soon as you call a game bad, it just becomes tainted. And I'm tired of it. It's something that I'm tired of when it comes to content creators that make their reviews, because they jump on a bandwagon to kind of like throw games under the bus and kind of just like I feel like they just don't really play the games. And I feel like, if I were to review games, I would probably only review games that I actually play instead of trying to meet a quota. And that's just how I see it. So I'm going to talk about a few things that a few other outlets have basically talked about. So, for example, I was looking at What Culture's game review for Gotham Knights, and they were complaining about the UI. Now, I understand that games just tend to have like the not most pleasing look to them when it comes to their menus, but I feel like this isn't me defending it. I think it obviously can look better for Gotham Knights, but it's something that I don't give a crap about. I think when people complain about UI for a lot of games, unless if it's the actual UI for the actual game while you're playing it, like the HUD, even then, I don't really give a damn about what it looks like. So when it comes to the UI for the menu and picking your abilities and stuff like that, it is messy and it is like stupid looking, but let's be real, nobody cares. Like, I don't care after 10 minutes of playing the game. As soon as I'm out of that menu, I don't even think about it. I go into the menu. Once I learn it, I go get what I need to get, and then I'm on to the next thing. It was the same thing with Spider-Man. Spider-Man had, I think, a lot of abilities that, you just would look at it and you were like, all right, I gotta sit here and go through all of it. And it obviously, it looked a little better, but it's the same thing. You're just looking for an icon and then wondering if that's what you're going to pick. That's it. That's basically how I see UIs. And it's kind of like the same thing when people are talking about, like, look at the amazing graphics of the water. And it's like, who cares? Unless you're actually playing a game where, like, you're racing boats or something, I feel like water physics and graphics just are just pointless. You only care about it for 3 seconds and then you move on. So as soon as somebody talks about, like, water graphics, I think that it's the most immature thing and the useless thing to talk about. It's the same thing with, like, the city. So for example, I think a lot of the outlets, a lot of the journalism outlets tend to point out that Gotham is lifeless, but I've yet to see anybody talk about the actual menu, the graphics menu that enables the city density to be at its highest. And for example, I'll show you guys on screen, there is a setting to set it to its highest. The problem being that, like, I don't think I can personally run it with my rig as well as stream. So that tends to be, like, the biggest problem for me, but that's my own issue. That's my own hardware. That's my own limitations. But it's there, and nobody has ever mentioned the density menu, like, on the graphics menu. It's just insane that, a lot of these people are paid to review a game and don't even know what's in the graphics settings. I understand that the console settings may not have the same thing, but that's honestly just like where we're at. We're at a point where I think games coming out sooner rather than later are going to test the limits of consoles. They're already old. And it's not me shitting on consoles. I am a PC player now, but it's how technology works. The reason why PC gaming is considered expensive is because a lot of people tend to go out and buy the newest and greatest graphics card that can run the newest and supposedly greatest games and their graphical hurdles that they kind of throw at you. And it's kind of like, that's just how technology works. And it's something that I think that we don't really realize, and that is the reality of it versus the expectation of, well, I have the new PS5, I have the new Xbox, and we should be able to play any new game at its max settings. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. My expectation is that I don't need for the game to run at 60 FPS, 30 FPS is fine. I don't think people understand how FPS works in games. That's kind of like, I think, one thing that a lot of people have been talking about when it comes to the life of the city and it being lifeless. It's at nighttime, right? So if you really want to go into reality, how many people are walking around, driving around at like 3 a.m.? It's not very often, even in New York City. And so I think that it's a little bit of a statement that's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, because it's like, I think the amount of people you see in Gotham is actually more realistic than it is to real life. The way the missions are presented are lacking. I will say that I've seen a lot of the other reviewers kind of talk about how you have to go into a menu to do certain things, like when you're fighting Mr. Freeze or Clayface or whatever. You're kind of actually, I could see why it's annoying. It should be out in the world. It would be cool, because that way you could kind of just like run into the enemies and kind of just start the mission, and that would be nice. But I do see why they've done it. It's because when you play those missions, it's a way for them to kind of like section off the city, Gotham City, and kind of actually like affect it with that actual villain, to the point where, like, all right, it becomes a full mission. It feels like it's their own. So for example, if you were fighting Mr. Freeze, he could actually freeze up a whole part of an island and kind of not really affect the game as much in the open world sense. Not only would it be cool if they did do that, but I could understand why at the same time that, like, they don't. But I won't really go against it too much, because of the fact that, like, when you do the Clayface mission, he's running around the city, he's breaking things down, they change it, they add ramps and stuff like that. So they try to make the mission a little more engaging, which is nice. It's pretty cool. Obviously, Spider-Man did it better, but it still does the job that it needs to do. It still kept me immersed in Gotham City. To me, the real issues are more of the mechanics and parts of the way the mechanics work during gameplay. The gameplay is nice, the story carries the game, the atmosphere, the music, it's all excellent. But whoever designed the game, how it works, or whoever undermined them from above should be fired, honestly, because I don't like the fact that like you're in the middle of a fight and a lot of the enemies will just like punch at you from across the whole like alleyway and actually hit you. There's no iframes, you have no invincibility frames, and there have been times where I'm like fighting a boss and I get grabbed while I'm doing a flip and there you just like it's so hard to outrun and outmaneuver a lot of like I think abilities that Clayface, for example, was doing that I had to flip 3 times just to make sure to dodge 2 hits basically. And it's just so slow, it's clunky, it's very janky. And that is where I think the game is the biggest fault. I think that's where the game literally loses like 2 points for me. I think the game is a 7 out of 10. Two things that affect it is obviously, yeah, the way the mission structure is, and obviously just the mechanics of how it affects the gameplay. The gameplay is kind of nice, it's just that it needs to be sped up, and I hope it's something that is only needing a part 2 to kind of fix. Obviously, it's too late to fix it now. I doubt they would fix it. It's sad that we live in a world where, like, you'll have patches for Overwatch, and things will change or gameplay mechanics will change for a character, but when it comes to like a single player game, you rarely see that happen. That's the problem with it. That's where like it just becomes a bit of a drag. It's the mechanics. When you fight bosses, the health bars are way too long like to take down. It's so slow, it's sluggish. Gotham Knights was made to be played with 2 players or more. And it obviously shows when you're fighting bosses where like a boss fight will take about like 20 minutes if you don't even die. And it becomes a lot more difficult as a solo player. And I understand it's like, all right, so just queue up with somebody else. But it's sometimes a thing where like I want to just experience it for myself. I want to see my character and I don't want to affect somebody else's gameplay or vice versa. So I think that that's where like they kind of dropped the ball, where it is designed for 2 players or more, and it does make the game a lot easier to fight those bosses. It becomes so janky fighting those bosses 1v1 because one, the health bars are way too big, and like the way to dodge a lot of the moves is too clunky enough as it is. So it really is, it's punishing you because of the designer's choice. It's not punishing you because you're a bad player at all. And that's the real issue with the game. That's the only issue with the game. Because when you play it and you do everything else, when I'm going out like stopping crimes and stuff, I love my build. I'm playing Stealth Robin, which is an absolute mistake. It's the worst thing about the game when you have a build that only works against enemies, but when it comes to story missions where you can't be stealthy, it sucks because you can't do anything until late game, and you're not doing stealth takedowns on a boss and 10 enemies that are swarming around you. There's no way of doing that. So I wish they would have designed it where stealth is something that is kind of like in fewer abilities. Like you could kind of unlock one ability that will do 2 of the stealth abilities that they give to you, because the game really rewards you with like high damaging melee attacks or something like that, or in the case with Red Hood, you do more critical damage with his guns. That works out a lot better than you trying to use, for example, with Red Hood, he's able to grab enemies, throw a bomb on their back, and then shove them into another enemy and have them both explode. But how are you going to do that to Clayface, who is like 2 stories high? It doesn't work that way, and that's what kind of sucks about it. And there's no respec for it. So again, it's the design of the game that's ruining it because they didn't really they didn't make the game modern for 2022. It feels like a clunkier version of the Arkham games back when they released. And it's not exactly like Arkham. I know a lot of people like to be like, it's not Arkham. It's the same shit. Like the takedowns and being stealthy and kind of like fighting like the five enemies at once, except this time they all attack you at once. That has definitely been, I think, the biggest problem with the game is just the mechanics for it. The problem with the reviews, though, is that people see the game receive a 4 out of 10 and want to include it with the dumpster fire games like Anthem. The game is far from a 4 out of 10. It's an easy 7 out of 10 because that's just how I see it, all because of the combat system and how bad it is compared to the enemies that take advantage of you not having those invincibility frames. So again, it sucks that you're getting punished as like when you're in the middle of a fight because the enemies are taking advantage of the fact that they can like magnetize themselves to you from behind while you're trying to kick somebody else's ass. It sucks. And that's what ruins the game, but everything else carries the game. The story is amazing, the world is amazing, the map is excellent. Their version of Gotham is so cool, and I love it. I want to see a part two. These are things that can be improved in the second one, but it doesn't deserve to be anywhere near the level of what Anthem was. Because everyone who designed the world, everyone who designed the story, whoever did the music was just excellent. Everything is just excellent about the game. The content is solid for what it is as a first entry into a world that can grow, just as Injustice spawned a whole comic series around the world it is about. I can see the game happening with Gotham Knights. I see like comic books being released, a world without Batman finally being told as how the Bat family has to take over. You could introduce Batwing, Batwoman, all of them. I would love to see that in the series. I would like to see Gotham Knights grow on the level of Injustice. But the thing is, like, people who are on the outside looking in on the game, they don't experience the content. What is the real problem? Just the fighting. Like, it's just janky, and people on the outside listening to poorly explained reviews, lumping the title in with games that actually have issues. In comparison to Anthem, that deserves their 3 out of 10 for having no content, great gameplay, no story. Like, it had great gameplay. I liked Anthem in terms of what the gameplay was, but there was no content, there was no story, and being a true mess, there is no similarity to the mess content creators call Gotham Knights. The people that actually play it have mostly enjoyed it, and the ones that gripe only recite what everyone says that is not true. I've been enjoying the game, and I hope you guys eventually give it a chance, but I thought this was kind of fun to talk about. But I've seen a lot of content creators and games journalists jump on the same bandwagon, which is why I don't trust it, because a lot of them tend to not even play the games that they review. Instead, they just follow what IGN said. I'm not here for that. I'm here to enjoy some games, and I'm here to tell you guys it's a decent game. Will it be the best game? No, not at all. Far from it. But it's definitely a lot better than what people are calling it.